So up next we have Ben Townsend. Ben Townsend grew up in a brown house on a small hill overlooking a very large cornfield. He has since lived in a few different places and still owes library fines from Ann Arbor, Michigan, Lexington, Virginia, and New York City, where he currently resides. Ben tries not to work too hard and enjoys a good drink, though he's been known to take a bad one for the right price. Everybody, Ben Townsend.
Hey guys, let's keep it going for Varley. Nice. I will be doing more Mad Libs and talking a little more about rape. JK. This is a piece of short fiction, and it's called Our Feature Presentation. Ryan Armack's house was usually empty in the afternoon. The place felt a little eerie when there was no one around, probably because it was kept in such methodically good order. The inside of the house looked like a fresh sheet of graph paper. A grid of sharp right angles dictated the placement of everything. The furniture was all squarely arranged. Picture frames were so straight that they could have been windows. The bottles were lined up in the shower like the knives mounted vertically along the kitchen wall. Ryan was not proud of his somewhat obsessive cleanliness. When people first came in, they usually found it unsettling. The house was so tidy that it almost looked fake, or perhaps overly real, a catalog's idea of what a home should be. But this was Ryan's place, it belonged to him, and he had an uncontrollable impulse that controlled everything he owned. He had bought the house a year ago, even though his father had insisted he was too young for a mortgage. Ryan was offered a good job right after graduation at a well-known but small tech company based in the college town where he'd gone to school. He designed gadgets, and he couldn't resist buying a house because a house is basically one big gadget. Recently, Ryan had been doing a little spring cleaning in the basement. He was going through some boxes when he came across his old camcorder. It was a surprising discovery. He hadn't seen the camcorder in years. It was tucked into the corner of a box, surrounded by dozens of microtapes, the kind that are about the size of little matchboxes. Ryan picked the camera up, hefting its familiar weight in his palm. During college, he used to carry it around all the time. Even before phones got smarter and grew glass eyes, he had been slightly obsessed with recording video of everything. Not for any particular reason. Mostly he just filmed whatever was happening around him. The camcorder was something to hide behind. Recording his life gave him an excuse to actually pay attention to what was happening. There were hours, perhaps even days of video on those microtapes. Ryan had always imagined that someday he'd go back and watch them all, but instead they just ended up in this box, stacked and organized by date. Doing the filming had been fun. Going through the actual footage of himself in college had the potential to be a little tedious, or worse, humiliating. As he held it in his hand, Ryan was amused by how antiquated the camcorder looked. Modern machines age poorly. It only took a few years for them to go from cutting edge to clunky, but Ryan was still a very young man, just starting to get well into his 20s. There was a little door on the camcorder side with a screen embedded in it. Ryan swung it open. A little green light blinked. Amazingly, it seemed like there was still some battery left. Just to see what would happen, he fit a microtape into the camcorder and pressed play. Nothing happened. Ryan pursed his lips in frustration. Few things were more annoying than a device not working the way that it should. He used his fingernails to pry off the camcorder's bottom panel, exposing its delicate mechanisms. Ryan pressed play again, and the inside of the camera churned as 1,000 tiny gears swirled at once. So it's not completely broken, he thought. Eventually, Ryan determined that the camcorder was functional, but that the screen was busted and pretty much unfixable. The only way for him to watch any of the microtapes was to export the video to his laptop. Unfortunately, the camcorder's output wasn't something common like a USB or VGA. After searching the web for a few minutes, Ryan found that there was only one thing capable of linking the old camcorder to his laptop. It was a special sky blue adapter with lopsided ends. No one manufactured it anymore. He called around to a few computer stores until he located one that had the discontinued adapter in stock. Of course, the store was 40 minutes away and charging a ridiculous price for something that probably no one else in the whole world even wanted. Ryan decided to buy it anyway. He took off work and drove out there on what happened to be a beautiful afternoon. The roads were perfect for speeding. Acre after acre of sunny farm field drifted across the windows of his almost new white car. The rims shimmered like chrome battle shields as he flew back towards home. Sticking out of a plastic bag on the passenger seat, the sky blue adapter cord was just visible through its glossy packaging. Ryan occasionally glanced at it over the top of his sunglasses. Pretty much the only reason that he wanted to transfer all those microtapes onto his laptop was to look through them for several meaningful moments. There had to be at least a few times when he happened to film something important, even if it didn't seem that important at the time. His plan was to edit it all together into a short movie of all the best footage. He'd post it online and tag everyone that made an appearance. If social media was good for anything, it was for sharing stuff like this. He would probably hear from old acquaintances he hadn't spoken to in years. Most people love nothing more than reminiscing about the past. Problem was that Ryan actually hated reminiscing about the past. He thought of nostalgia as a weakness. It was like a drug. And being addicted to nostalgia was lonely. The only people you cared about were echoes. But Ryan was a person who sought out extremes, and if he was going to do this drug, he was going to do it right. Ryan wanted to make a video that distilled nostalgia down to its purest, uncut form. It would be a raw dose of the good old days, proof that Ryan and his friends hadn't just been teenagers, they had been legends. Ryan pulled into his garage and hopped out of the car with the plastic bag in his hand. The door opened when Ryan touched his cell phone to a small gray circle embedded in the door jamb. The entryway illuminated on its own as soon as he walked inside. See, Ryan had rigged up a special network of motion sensors that automatically switched on the lights in whichever room he entered. It also doubled as a security system. If something tripped the motion sensors without Ryan touching his phone to the door jamb, cameras in every room would awaken and begin to stream video to an off-site server. He brought his laptop and the camcorder into the living room and connected them with the sky blue cord. There was still a microtape in the camera, so it was all set to go. He almost began watching when he realized he didn't need to do it on a laptop. With a few keystrokes and some remote control navigation, Ryan got the flat screen television hanging on his wall to mirror the image on the computer screen. Now he was ready for the viewing. By coincidence, a cloud at that very moment floated in front of the sun, and the whole room dimmed. Even though there was no one around to hear it, Ryan whispered, "Lights, camera, action." His finger pushed the play button, and the tape started to roll. At first, it was impossible to tell what was happening. The television screen was filled with pure white light. The only sound coming from the speakers was the distinctive rush of wind pushing against a microphone. This was a video that Ryan had clearly recorded outdoors, but he couldn't discern any more details. Then the camera tilted downwards, and details began to emerge. Colors bled through the whiteness, and a horizon cut across the screen. Beige stalks of grass swayed into focus. A dull gray sky flickered overhead. The grainy silhouettes of two young men faded into view. Now he realized this was video of him and his buddies launching a rocket that they had built themselves. See, when Ryan first arrived at college, he'd almost immediately made friends with a group of fellow nerds. They weren't very interested in drinking, which meant that they had almost nothing in common with their fellow freshmen. They probably got the idea for the launch from October Sky. The rocket was less advanced than the one in the movie, but it did contain a series of propulsion packages. They would go off in stages and carry it high enough to see the curve of the Earth along the horizon. That was the theory anyway. Inside the television, Ryan's two friends stood around nervously, wondering if the thing was going to blow up in their faces. Of course, Ryan knew from his living room in the future that it would go off perfectly. Jeremy and Aaron had been his two closest compadres back during his freshman year. It was incredible how young they looked. 18-year-olds have no way of knowing just how 18 they are. There still wasn't any sound on the video except the wind, but a lot of them was obvious just in the way that they were laughing and horsing around. That's not correct, but take it for what you will. Jeremy was a gentle guy, a smoker who said very few words. Aaron smiled a lot, but also had a lot of anger. He was the kind of outcast that couldn't stand the incorrectness of the world and all the people in it. The crackling of the microphone suddenly ceased, and Jeremy and Aaron's voices filled Ryan's living room. "Whoa, whoa, whoa," said Aaron, putting a hand on Jeremy's chest. "I think the wind just died down." Both boys stopped moving and glanced over at Ryan. He had the last word on whether the conditions were right for the rocket launch. Jeremy and Aaron were looking into the camera, staring at the older Ryan, who was outside the television. "Launch time," the younger Ryan's voice called from off screen. They all cheered, and the frame began to shake as they ran towards a nearby stand of trees where they had placed the ignition box. The three friends dove into a crouch behind a row of bushes. Jeremy's face showed up on the screen, looking tense. He had the gray ignition box in his hand, a thumb over its big red button. Are you guys ready? He asked. Just do it, barked Aaron. Jeremy pressed the button, and the camera pivoted back to the field. The rocket's tip was just visible over the tall grasses. There was a very long moment in which nothing transpired. Tension melted into disappointment as the three young men inside the television began to believe that their project was a failure. The image on the screen cast a pale glow on Brian's face, which was stretched into a knowing grin. There was a moment coming that was so good that it could have been scripted. Damn it, shouted Ryan's voice as the camera remained pointed at the field. You guys are idiots. Didn't you check the fuse remote? I can't believe that. But he wouldn't get a chance to say what it was he couldn't believe, because right on cue, there was a pink flash and the rocket thundered into the air. All three of them whooped and hollered. What was that about? Who's an idiot? Asked Jeremy. Shut up, said Aaron. The camera followed the rocket as it sliced the sky in half with a vapor trail. The second propulsion pack ignited. It gained new fury, rising faster and faster. The rocket shrank into a small patch of dancing white pixels, then disappeared. The image on the television then dropped back down to Earth. Jeremy and Aaron were running across the field, chasing the spot where the rocket had vanished. The three of them had searched for it all day, but without any luck. Who knows how far the wind carried it? Perhaps it erupted in flames somewhere in the sky, so high up that the stars were visible despite the daylight. Ryan felt a small pang of regret. Some things were lost forever. That rocket launch had been so long ago. Aaron and Jeremy weren't really his friends anymore. They'd drifted apart since their first year of college. He traveled a long way since then, even though he was still living in the same town, even though nothing had really changed. He stopped the microtape and removed it from the camcorder. He could use the rocket launch, but there probably wasn't anything else useful on there. Ryan wanted to see a tape that wasn't from his freshman year, when all he did was play with bombs. His nostalgia movie needed to have some real human moments on it. Explosions were flashy, but Ryan was looking for something with more power. A new microtape went into the camera and its wheels began to turn. Ryan's young face filled the television hanging on the wall. His dorm room hovered in the background. He looked unsure, but happy. It wasn't clear what this could be. He rarely ever filmed himself. Then a voice spoke that chilled Ryan to the bone. Why do you always carry a camera around? She asked. This was the girl. Ryan had developed crushes on plenty of women, but she was the first to show any interest in him. His nerdiness had made him helpless all through high school, and college wasn't much better. She had flirted with him for a brief while, perhaps only a couple of weeks. Nothing physical had ever happened between them, making the memory of her all the more vivid. I don't always carry it around, said the Ryan that was on the screen. Not all the time. Oh, whatever, she replied. I always see you filming people with this thing. This was right after they met. She had conducted this little interview as a way of teasing him. Ryan watched his teenage face struggle not to stare at her with too much longing. I don't want to miss anything, he said with a shrug. So why were you filming me? Her voice asked. What? I wasn't, he replied, though his face was clearly lying. I was just taping the cafeteria. You're the one that started talking to me, remember? I just felt bad for you, all by yourself. If you weren't filming me, then why did you try to hide the camera? I was putting the camera away, Ryan said. It would be creepy if I taped every person I met. I'm not that weirdo from American Beauty. I wouldn't care, her voice said with a theatrical flourish. Girls always say they don't care, but trust me, if I kept pointing a camera at you, you would start to think I was weird. I'm pointing a camera at you right now. Do you think I'm weird? Yes, he said. She laughed. Ryan's heart melted. Well, maybe I am, she said. People can film me all they want. What's the difference? I don't care when people look at me. I don't know. What about your privacy? People who are obsessed with their privacy are probably just lonely, she said, and I'm never lonely. I'll bet, Ryan said, looking sheepishly at the ground. Oh my gosh, she said, you totally like me. No, I don't, he replied. He was smiling, but you could see the panic on his face. You totally like me, she taunted. Admit it. I'm going to get it on camera. Just say you like me. You know you want... Ryan stopped the tape. He didn't need to see this. For a few moments, he just stared blankly at the empty television screen. All the pieces of his well-organized home suddenly seemed to be moving farther away, abandoning him with his thoughts. Wherever she was now, she would definitely think that he was weird for watching this. But she wasn't here to see, and neither was anyone else. He removed the tape, put it back in the box, and grabbed another one. It's easy to pretend that things you do when you're alone never happened. The next video started up, and it was immediately obvious that this was from his senior year. The camera was swerving through a party at the house Ryan had lived in. It was evidence of his social transformation. Maybe people just cared less about how nerdy he was as he got older, but Ryan eventually stopped watching life and joined in the action, is what I assume I meant there. Here were a few thousand people having fun at once, or 1,000 people having fun at once, gears in the machine that made the good times happen. He had brought them into his house. He was capturing them inside his camera. The lighting shifted wildly as it made its way through the crowd. He glimpsed shadowy images of people he barely recognized and overexposed features of people he wanted to forget. She was there. Her eyes shot the camcorder a quick, condescending look as she laughed with her friends. A mustachioed face stumbled up into the frame. He was that guy from the poetry program who always dressed like a professor. Life used to be a book I was writing, he slurred. Then it became a book I was reading, and now it's just static, playing in an empty room. The poet burped, then went stiff as a board and fell flat on the ground. No one nearby seemed to notice. Everyone was really drunk. In fact, Ryan must have been even drunker. He had no recollection of filming this at all. The camcorder weaved its way out onto the porch. The noise became a little less echoed. The frame turned back towards the house, and the camera zoomed in through the front windows. The picture settled on a bored-looking girl sipping a red Solo cup. It was Allison. She was Jeremy's fiancée. In a few months, they were going to be married in California. But back when this was filmed, the two probably hadn't even met yet. They didn't start dating until the very end of his senior year. Ryan was going to be a groomsman at the wedding. It made him mildly uncomfortable to see his friend getting married. It seemed to create a momentum in his own life. He was leaving behind the past he barely knew, pulled forward into an almost certain future. Allison suddenly looked up and smiled. She said hello and mouthed her own name. From the left side of the screen, Jeremy walked up to her and shook her hand awkwardly. He seemed hesitant as he leaned into her ear to repeat something over the noise of the party. Their body language was obvious. These were people who didn't know each other. Jeremy was introducing himself, and Allison was letting him. Ryan screamed in surprise and jumped up from his couch in excitement. This was what he'd been looking for, a truly great moment from the past. He would burn it onto a disc and give it to Jeremy to play at their wedding. How great would that be? Documentation of the absolute beginning of their romance. It would be the best wedding video that ever existed in the history of wedding videos. The camera turned away as the drunk Ryan, who was holding it, got bored. It was disappointing there wasn't more footage of them flirting, but it would be enough if it was edited right. The frame settled on the people hanging out on the porch. This was the quiet place in the party where people came to express their alcohol-fueled thoughts more precisely. Two college guys were standing by the railing, having an almost ludicrously typical college guy conversation. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is one of the best movies ever made, said a guy with a large beard. I disagree with that sentiment, but I understand what you mean, responded a wide-nosed kid in glasses. Well, what do you mean by that? Asked Large Beard inquisitively. These guys might have been high. You mean that Eternal Sunshine is one of the best of a certain kind of movie, explained Glasses. A movie made in the last 10 years, American, with an artful Criterion cover. And if you're talking about all movies of all time, Sunshine doesn't even come close. Are you saying a movie has to be old in order to be good? Asked the Beard. Glasses paused for a long moment, looking skeptically into the air. Yes, that is what I'm saying, he said finally. That's dumb and pretentious, laughed the Beard. But don't you just love old movies? The Glasses said wistfully. Yes, but I also love new movies. I just love how old movies look, how they're cut, how they move, the crude yet fluid way that an old movie tells a story. There's nothing like it. New movies contain more detail. The techniques are more refined, countered the Beard. And it's not just about technology. Modern movies have more history to draw on. It's called improving over time. Yeah, the techniques are more perfect now, said Glasses. A new movie is a perfectly cobbled world, but I love the method of an old movie. All they had was a tin box with wheels for a camera and miles of black string to run through it. Every shot, every pan, every cut from an old movie is executed with a certain kind of certainty, the kind of certainty that you can only have if you are half convinced that you have no idea what you're doing. The beard laughed. I don't think you really believe any of that, he chuckled. You're more interested in sounding right than being right. There's a camera in your face. The glasses looked embarrassed. I am sort of pontificating for pontificating's sake, he said, looking into the camera, but I really do believe everything I've said. Generally, I believe the things that I say when I'm grandstanding more than the things I say when I'm not. Then the video cut out. The sun had set. It was dark and quiet in Ryan's living room. He was still standing up. All this nostalgia was exhausting. He was glad that he'd bought the sky blue adapter, though. Abruptly, all the lights turned off. Then they came back on, then off again. The room began to strobe. Ryan looked up at the living room's motion sensor. It was going haywire. He waved his hand in the air, but the light bulbs kept blinking like they were trying to say something in Morse code. Ryan put his hand on his hips. Nothing was more annoying than things not working how they should. He watched the security system activate. All the cameras throughout the house went live. Ryan stared into the lens that was installed in the high corner of his living room. It was recording him in black and white at that very moment, streaming it to an off-site server. Hopefully it hadn't been filming him this entire time. He didn't want there to be video of him when he was alone in his house watching television. At least the footage was in a secret account, a place no one else would ever see.